Hello, internet friends. My name is Bay. Welcome back to the Shadowlands Alpha First Pass coverage here. This is going to be the overall Monk wrap-up video. The footage you're going to be seeing in the back is always, of course, going to be the spec that I end each class junket on. Got some Brewmaster footage in the background. And because we just did the Brewmaster video, I'll probably talk about Brewmaster more towards the end of this recording. Mostly due to we cleared the whole dungeon, and we've gotten, we get better as we've cleared these. So they're a little bit shorter at the end of this video. So look forward to that, or you can skip ahead. Maybe if you want to only hear about Brewmaster. I don't know when it's going to be specifically, but towards the end, we ran back down to the bottom of the Necrotic Wake dungeon just to pull a bunch of trash. And for me to do don't heal the tank tests, where I would stack up crazy amounts of the Celestial Brew Purified Chi and see how big of a brew shield, a guard shield, I could get. So that's later on, but all the footage, of course, you'll see before then is just derping around, testing things on Brewmaster, testing cooldown windows, stuff like that. But this video, of course, is going to be the overall talk about all three specs and sort of the Monk and my thoughts on it therein and how it all felt, you know, each day I was testing it, because I put a whole, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, sometimes almost 6 hours into these, and including the dungeon run, and I got other people in the group, and we talk about kind of stuff and how they feel, all that stuff. But all that goes up here on the YouTube channel. So if you would like to assist in my YouTube side of my career, somewhat being a little bit more, I guess, officialized, and maybe potentially even getting that play button from YouTube, so they'd be like, oh, that YouTube channel that's been here for like 7 or 8 years actually exists now. If we can try to get to 100,000 subscribers throughout this whole testing process, that would be awesome. So if you want to hit that subscribe button here on YouTube, you can hit the bell button if you'd like for notification to be turned on, but that, of course, is completely optional. Your viewership is far be it enough for me. Commenting and interacting here and there and giving me your side of the opinion in case you have other things you want to say if you're not actually part of the live streams when all this happened. But thank you very much for subscribing if you are. But if you share the video around, you know, nudge your friends and your guildies and things like that. You know, I would give you can pay a subscription on YouTube. Let's see if we can get 100K. So the Monk. And I have my notes in front of me, of course, here, going back through things for everything we've gone over. And I think the quickest summary stuff these here is all the things that happened with all the baseline updates to Monk. Expel Harm, for example, obviously has, I think, the most interaction with the Mistweaver and the Brewmaster Monk. I don't know what its point is for Windwalker, because it will do so little damage and contribute to so little amount of your healing that I'm not sure what the point there is. It might be a little bit extra something on the top instead of just, maybe you need like a little bit of a healing, you know, boost. You're not going to actually channel Vivify into yourself. But Expel Harm for Mistweaver gets that extra rank, so they're able to actually hit it as an instant heal on their channeled Soothing Mist target and get both, it heals them and their target, and then deals that 10% extra damage to a nearby target. That's kind of neat. Obviously, the Brewmaster itself just has the ability to pull in a multitude of healing spheres nearby via Gift of the Ox and then do more damage based on that. Even if they have a problem right now with their Spinning Crane Kick rank perk that makes it pull your healing spheres towards you, which is really super jank, and I've heard not a lot of great things about it because you don't want to use them until you want to use them. And the big one, of course, is Fortifying Brew. Still is the big chunky brew reduction, you know, via cooldown brew mechanic for Brewmaster. How many times can I say brew in one sentence? But the Windwalker Monk getting Fortifying Brew is big. Mistweaver, of course, already has it. It's been tweaked just a little bit. So if you haven't seen this yet, or you haven't been updated on this, or you missed the update 2 overall Fortifying Brew, it's still the bigger version for Brewmaster again, but for Mistweaver and Windwalker, which it's new to, it has a 2-minute cooldown, which is up from 90 seconds. It's 15% current and max health HP as a bump up, down from the current on live 20%, which that also could be relative to number squishing and how we're all getting mushed down quite a number of eye levels. but it's also 15% DR, damage reduction, down from 20%, and the duration remains 15. Now, of course, in different ways, more HP and a lesser DR is still effective health versus damage. And, Cries and Shaman, right? Only have Astral Shift. The 90-second, 40% DR for 8 seconds. A little more bursty oriented, even though I think almost any enhancement shaman you talk to will want, Shamanistic Rage back. The somewhat longer cooldown, lesser DR, but longer duration. Because normally trying to smooth out damage incoming to your face is a bit more of a task that takes a little bit longer than just a couple of seconds sometimes, depending on if you're just only trying to time it for that one thing. Because they can't, Blizzard in this case, they can't try to balance Shaman DR for always thinking we have Spirit Wolf, even though a lot of times we do, but that literally silences the Shaman. So, Mistweaver Monk, having the Fortifying Brew, Windwalker, of course, still has Touch of Karma, and Good Karma still exists, and there is a bit of that ickiness that was brought up. I do believe I put that in the video about how it's potentially used where you can combine the two to increase your health pool so that more of the health damage reflection for standing in the bad goes into the karma window, which I just don't really. Honestly, that's so ridiculous if people do that. And another big one is the Touch of Death, which, as we kind of bounce around between all the monks here, as I'm realizing is a little bit easier to talk about, Touch of Death has gotten a few comments on the YouTube videos so far for the previous 3, where it's good or bad or why is it there, blah, blah, blah. I think it definitely has a bit of a hierarchy in how good it will be. I think Windwalker and Mistweaver are definitely winning in this department because the Touch of Death mechanic for Brewmaster is obviously the same one. They'll have more HP though, not by a long shot, because Brewmaster actually doesn't have a huge HP curve behind it. It basically has the same HP as a regular monk, but it has the potential to use their Touch of Death as a big HP chunk, right? That's like 35% of your actual health to big PvE boss mobs under 15% health. And then 200% of that damage you deal is what will reduce your stagger. So there is something there, but Purifying Brew is so often. So Touch of Death, say for Mistweaver, is gotta spawn some healing orbs when you use it on a target. Currently, it's not hooked up right now. And it's something that, so a healer doesn't have an interrupt, which is the Mistweaver Monk. You can push things with your Ring of Peace, and you can stun things with your Tiger Tail Sweep. But you can't interrupt anything. So at least this, if you're in Mythic Plus and there's that angry caster necromancer in your way, and right when it gets below enough health, and you'll learn this and you'll get the feel for it, right, on this nasty pack where you have to pull, maybe 2 mob packs together or whatever for timing windows, or depending on how AoE packs work, hitting a Touch of Death and totally blasting something from the health threshold to dead instantly. I mean, death is the strongest form of CC, right? So even if it cuts down a few seconds of a mob existing, or imagine the big old mobs that get, I don't know, what is it? Enraged, right? The enraged effect, or raging rather, in Mythic Plus. And you're able to contribute as a healer to just removing an ad. That is a healing cooldown, essentially, right? There are those, I'm thinking, my brain immediately went to those giant, big totem ghost troll guys in the King's Rest dungeon that obviously if you bolster incorrectly, or it's a fortified weak and they have their enrage effect that you can't really dispel. Granted, there are a couple more ways to dispel enrage, with Rose coming into play with that one. If you don't have that at your disposal, maybe you obviously spam heal your tank a bit, but then once that health threshold gets there and you can hover that mob, there might have to be a weak aura involved in this so that it'll tell you when you can Touch of Death things based on health percentage, and I'm sure that'll be made just like that, right? You walk over there, you slap that mob with Touch of Death, it's gone. And you're a healer. Just did that. What are you going to do with your actual, like, Tiger Palm and your Blackout Kick Way of the Monastery damage? Not that. So that's a pretty interesting way to look at it, as that little extra something. And that little extra sauce is, I do believe, what Blizzard is trying to do. It's a bit of a soft touch on some classes and hard touches on others, like rogues getting able to remove enrages and have both non-lethal poisons. It's kind of a strong touch, but the soft touch is not, they don't want to put like a 5% HP or 5% int or 5%, attack power battle shot on every single freaking class in the game again. They don't want to go back to all the way back into the Mr. Pandaria style. So I think in that way, they're trying to add something to each. And the Touch of Death for Windwalker is obviously similar. It decouples them from being a quote-unquote slave to the Todd window, where you'd have that Gale Burst combination of so much of your damage is only there. So now they can actually just use it as that little bit of extra utility, and when they do so, and when they use it, and when they either kill a mob in a Mythic Plus, or they blast a boss with it when they're low health, you gain the 3 Chi Spheres, which can keep accelerating back your rotation. And since it's free, it just basically turns your HP percentage into damage into Chi Spheres. That gives you a Fist of Fury right off the bat, right, for using that ability, and then you can follow it up with the rest of your combination. So it's not maybe as like crazy or glorious as timing all of your things to put into a big Gale Burst Touch of Death window, but that opens up the Windwalker monk anyway in that regard to really pay attention more to your SEF windows and using those for single target or AoE. You're making sure you have all of your abilities lined up for a SEF, or you even like wait for the new Empyrean Power style kick proc to happen, and then you SEF, and then you go to AoE town. So I think that's kind of where like the soft nudge is angling for monks anyway, so that you're not so pigeonholed into putting all of your single target damage into one ability that everyone has to line up for. So it's pretty good. I think it's a pretty neat one. Obviously, the weird part about Touch of Death, it's still it's a physical ability, so it's impacted by the physical DR armor on everything. So it's automatically cut down by 30 or so % just right off the bat, which is weird. But sure. Next big thing for overall monks, I think, is definitely flavorful, and I do believe Brewmaster may have won out in this regard, depending on how they actually fix Invoke Yulon, is that all 3 monks now have their Invoke, where they have, Mistweaver has Yulon baseline now, no longer Crack Bird, is Crack Dragon, but you can talent into Crack Bird, and then you get the Fist-Weaving Eminence cooldown, similar to sort of like Avenging Wrath or Avenging Crusader nonsense that Holy Paladins do. You become that healer that just goes in and chonks away and punches and kicks and haha. And the damage to healing conversion, which if you watch the Mistweaver dungeon video, which again, everything is put together in the channel guide. So if you missed any of the actual testing or want to go back and watch any of the dungeon runs on any of the specs to see sort of what I'm talking about here firsthand as it's happening, all those videos are in the channel guide. So it's in the video description box right here on YouTube, or it's the ! guide command over on my Twitch channel. But invoking Yulon, the Jade Serpent, the Celestial, will heal allies with Celestial Breath and spawn healing spheres for nearby allies. But that's not hooked up yet, though. All it does is it literally even sounds like Chi-Ji and does the same like Crack Bird jumping around thing. I'm assuming they're going to work on a new animation style where Yulon actually maybe flies around or floats around, or has to be in a group and breathes on targets and something there, and then spawns healing spheres, which when if you walk close enough to them, they pop and heal the people again. And that's the baseline of it. And then again, you talent into the fist weaving version. Whereas Windwalkers just have Angry Lightning Cat, which at least Angry Lightning Cat lasts a long time and does have an AoE component, whereas say like baseline Feral Spirits for enhancement do nothing. Currently, they do nothing. Obviously, again, this is very much alpha, and things are subject to change. And we'll have to wait and see how things change there. But then you have Brewmaster with Invoking Angry Dave, or Nizao, the Black Ox. That has a actual defensive benefit and offensive benefit for a tank. And that's always the fine line to walk with a tank cooldown. But as I've said before, and we went over this in the Guardian Druid video as well, with Berserk coming back, all tanks need something, because Brewmaster and Guardian had theirs gutted away from them, or in the case of Brewmaster, never really had one. So you just kind of did the same thing you always do all the time. You had no moments of power. And the moment of power then for Brewmaster comes from summoning the Black Ox, who will stomp and deal additional damage once it's hooked up. It doesn't work properly right now. Will do additional damage based on the stagger you've recently purified. So he takes some of your stagger, 25% of it, and it hits him instead. So it becomes an offset stagger. And then when you purify large amounts, if you're hitting like medium or you actually go to high and then pop him, we're not sure how much the damage will scale up. It might be similar actually to how Blood DK has a scaling damage tank component. They have a new rune of sanguination, that the health of the mob is a 1-to-1 percentage increase on death strike. So if the mob is at 100% health, you have no percentage. But if the mob is at, 0.1% health remaining, your death strikes will deal 99.9% more damage, right? Up to 100%. So I wonder if that's how it's going to work with Dave. So if you're at, 50% stagger and you purify 25% of it, because you purify half, then it'll give 25% more damage to the follow-up stomps on Nuzao. So if you're at high stagger, 70 or 80%, and you cleanse out with a purifying brew 40 or 45% of your stagger, it'll buff him by 45% or whatnot. So not only does that give you, the Brewmaster, something, but it also gives your DPS cooldown something, which is also not only a DPS cooldown, but also a survivability cooldown, which is how other tanks work, right? Like going into Vengeance Demonic form or popping wings on Prop Paladin, right? At least it gives you both offensive and defensive benefits. That's how a tank cooldown should be. So it's cool to see that coming back, but again, like Windwalkers just kind of exist, but that's not their main base DPS cooldown as a DPS class. They obviously have Storm, Earth, and Fire, which still has weird AI, I suppose. And once you tell it to target your main target, it'll never spread back out again, which I kind of think is a weird one, as far as I know. Correct me if I'm wrong there. But SEF obviously picks up to 3 targets when you cast them. But if you cast it again off the GCD and you focus target them, so it's actually a DPS gain on single target, you can't send them back. So you pick. You have to hit them AoE only or only single target, which I believe is the case with them. But they're obviously the DPS window you mostly care about. Angry, Awesome, Lightning Tiger, Fire and Forget, which also has some AoE bonuses there, is just sort of a flavor and oomphy move if it's just a giant lightning cat imp. But sometimes some abilities can be that way. It just sucks when your only base cooldown does nothing, a la Feral Spirit. But there's some AoE target cap things I have here notes-wise, but I'm not exactly sure. We had a lot of talk today when we're doing Blood DK. A lot of talk on stream about the AoE caps, and I think a lot of people are just really scared about how it may really leave some specs behind depending on how adjustments go and how tuning goes. Obviously, tanks normally don't have a lot of AoE capping, even though we did find multiple things AoE capped on the Blood Death Knight. But their overall like core kit, right? So like Blood Boil and spreading Blood Plague, not target capped. So things on the Brewmaster not being target capped are things like hitting everything in front of you with your Breath of Fire, or doing your baseline Spinning Crane Kick, not target capped. Even though Spinning Crane Kick for Windwalker and Mistweaver is target capped at 6. But then Fist of Fury has always sort of been target capped, right? With the main target and the diminishing for secondaries. Same thing with like I-Beam hitting main target and then diminished for secondary targets. So things of that nature are there. But I just don't know if pulls in dungeons or maybe even raid bosses, and it's different in raids because you've got up to 30 people in normal and heroic and up to 20 in mythic, so you may not even really feel the huge amount of difference in if like Blizzard hits every target for less damage and your Fist of Fury hits fewer targets for more damage, then it'll kind of all work itself out in the end, I think. That's one thing we really can't see right now with the current state of the alpha. We don't know how covenants are going to affect it, right? We don't know how, if there's going to be any legendaries affecting, say, Fist of Fury that makes it hit like 3 more targets or something. I don't know. We don't know if there's going to be any impact on the covenant baseline sort of damage abilities. A lot of them, if you look at them, so many of them are AoE focused I meant some people in chat today brought up, well, you know, there's certain things that are not AoE focused that are very single target. But what if there is a legendary or a covenant style thing that makes it cleave or ricochet off or pulse AoE damage? You don't know. So some feedback right now is, of course, good to have, but overall, we don't know how that's going to change as things move forward. Same thing with changing as things move forward with the Windwalker and Brewmaster two-hand and dual wield, which isn't hooked up right now because you can't Fist of Fury when you're using a two-hander. So that's not working right now for Windwalker. And it's different too because Frost is getting both dual wield and they're getting two-hand back. But when you can go dual wield and you have two weapon enchants in the game, and Blizzard so far isn't changing how weapon enchants work. You know, casters can only have one weapon enchant on their main hand weapon. They can't enchant their book offhand or anything. So either they make it so that you can, and everyone gets two weapon enchants, or they just go to your main hand gets a weapon enchant, and that's it. Because two-hand Frost is never going to be better than dual-wield Frost, I can't imagine, because you're going to lose a weapon enchant. You're going to lose, what, Razor Ice? And there's new rune forges for DK, for example, where they can have 40 extra runic power and all these different proc changes to increase the runic power generation. So two-handing on Brewmaster and Windwalker is weird in that same vein, kind of, because it's easier to get a two-hander potentially when you're gearing up in that gearing up process, and that's fine. And then eventually you go to two-wielding, because as a tank, then you can have one maybe tank enchant and then one offensive enchant, be it crit or versatility procs, whatever. Where same thing for the Windwalker is that you'll want two offensive enchants, not just one. That also may come down to math, because two-handers usually have more weapon DPS in them, and weapon DPS is part of the new attack power formula. So maybe you have one less weapon enchant, but the damage from a two-hander makes up for the loss of that one, even though weapon enchants don't add a ton. But you see what I mean here, is that there's coefficients behind all of that are how is that going to work? They should have never been changed in the first place, because if you think back to Windwalker nonsense goopy math in the past, when you had the two-hand and dual wield, there was like a different attack speed modifier or damage modifiers that were baked in baseline. What a nightmare that was. That was before the crazy attack power formula and stuff got worked out a couple expansions ago. So now it's a bit more smooth on that uptick. So we'll have to see how that changes, because we can't test that right now because you literally can't do all your abilities. You can't hit all your abilities yet with your two-hand equipped. I mean, you can as a Brewmaster. And you can't do it as a Brewmaster either. You can't equip an offhand one-hander if you watch that part of the beginning of the video. So not everything is even hooked up yet. And that's interesting, but alpha will gamma or whatever you want to bring up. So that's about all the notes I have here. There are also, of course, a couple of leveling talents that came into play with all of the monks. I think there are some neat ones there. Obviously, Brewmaster, I think, winning out again. They get in Clash back, which will be fun, even if you can't clash a target that's immune to the move. You still have a charge, which gives you more mobility options on top of if you take Chi Torpedo or, of course, roll by itself. So there are good things there. The fact that Clash is a AoE route is pretty crazy for Mythic Plus pulls, for example, because then it gives you the chance to root a whole bunch of mobs within 6 yards of you. And the new leg sweep is also 6 yards baseline now before Tiger Tail Sweep talent. So that syncs all up together with the Brewmaster, which is really nice. And I'm only scared about the balancing and tuning here right now with the Celestial Guard brew. And I put in the Brewmaster video the K-value stagger madness math. There's also posts intermittently. I don't have one for Mistweaver, but you should check if you want more information about the monks. They have an awesome community over on Peak of Serenity, where they have posts going up about initial thoughts and feedback and things of that nature from the people that are actually really involved in that theory crafting, math crafting, and feedback loop. But there are still pain points on all of them. So hopefully we'll see if things get worked out and tweaked as we go through this alpha cycle. But overall, there's lots of fresh feeling updates across the board. Like little things like Zen Meditation rank 2 for Brewmaster. You'll be able to move while Zen Med channels. So when you're off tanking and you can eliminate a huge amount of damage you have, or if you have some dot on you or something, that's going to be helpful so you can move and not just sit still for it. Potentially Stagger getting a rank 2 for magic damage is in the database, but we don't know if that's going to be a thing. We'll have to wait and see about that one. How about Windwalker having combat conditioning coming back, which is definitely a little bit extra bump for them as well when they're behind targets with their blackout kicks. So there's a couple more things that aren't hooked up yet. Again, like the healing spheres and the way even Yulon works for Mistweaver. But no immunities, no major crazy things. It definitely nudges, I think, Mistweaver forward a little bit more because now they actually have a built-in raid cooldown, which has been a problem because you've had Revival, which is huge. Revival isn't the same thing. And I get that, right? And obviously your Life Cocoon is a very single target, oh, the tank's almost dead kind of a thing. Let me know what your thoughts are if you're playing a monk, if you're thinking about playing a monk, if you're thinking about re-rolling into a monk. Let me know what you think about how the overall monk class has worked out, of course, and then we'll come back to this in the beta. And between the first pass and second pass, we'll be doing a lot of information gathering streams to hopefully make a lot of bullet pointed static free lists of pain points and suggestions and feedback for Blizzard. So stick around to those on the Twitch channel. That's where those will be happening. And then I'll do summary stuff here, of course, on YouTube. But thank you very much for listening. Hit that subscribe button if you're new here. If you enjoy the amount of coverage I am doing, check the channel guide where everything is then coagulated if you missed it, because only on the YouTube channel is the sort of the summary pieces. But until the next video, thank you very much for listening. And my name has been Bay. I'll see you in the next Shadowlands Alpha First Pass coverage videos. We got Death Knight coming up next. And I believe Mage is after that.